The wind moved gently through the cemetery trees as the grieving millionaire stood before the twin marble stones. Stones he had visited every Saturday for 18 months. His hands didn't shake today. His heart did. He placed the white lilies down and whispered the same question he whispered every week. "Why did you leave me?" A tiny shadow stopped beside him. Bare feet, torn hoodie, a small black homeless girl, maybe 10, eyes wide, unsure if she should speak. She swallowed and stepped closer. "Sir, your daughters are alive." He slowly turned, confusion tightening his jaw. The girl continued, voice trembling but certain. "I see them every day on my street. The same blonde twins on your stones. They play behind a blue house. They're alive, sir. I swear." His chest locked. Air refused to move. His fingers slipped from the lilies. For the first time in 18 months, grief didn't crush him. It cracked. Something else pushed through it. Hope, fear, a violent need to understand. He crouched down, searching her face for any sign of a lie. "What did you just say?" "They're alive," she whispered. Both of them. The world around him faded. Trees, stones, sky. Only her voice remained. Every instinct inside him screamed that this child wasn't guessing. She was remembering, repeating, reporting something real. And if she was right, then the accident he mourned, the funeral he paid for, the tears he buried himself under, all of it was a manufactured hell. The girl took a shaky breath. "I can take you there if you want." Silence dug into the ground between them. Then his voice broke through it. Quiet, dangerous, alive. "Show me. If this happened in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you stand for fairness, hit subscribe." He followed the little girl out of the cemetery, but every step felt like he was walking through a memory he no longer trusted. For 18 months, the story of the accident had been his reality. But now, with each footstep, that reality thinned. The girl walked ahead of him quietly, glancing back every few seconds as if to make sure he wouldn't disappear. Her name, she'd whispered, was Destiny. A fitting name, too fitting. Almost poetic in a way that made his stomach twist. As they reached the street, the man's mind replayed every moment after the accident. The rush police report, the way the officer wouldn't meet his eyes, the missing dash cam footage they blamed on a technical crash, Victoria's coldness at the funeral, her refusal to let him see the girls' bodies because it would be too traumatic. Traumatic for who? Him or her? Suddenly it all felt wrong. Not just strange, manufactured. Destiny slowed down to match his pace. "Sir, I didn't want to scare you," she murmured. I see them a lot, and they look happy sometimes. But they look scared too." His chest tightened. "Scared? Why?" "I don't know. They don't go outside unless that woman is gone. And even then, they always hold hands. The same way his daughters used to. They pass a row of small houses, paint peeling, yards uncut, a world far from the mansion where his girls had grown up. A gust of wind hit him, carrying flashes of memories, bedtime stories, morning cartoons, their tiny hands gripping his shirt. He had buried all of that. He had forced himself to stop imagining their voices. Now those voices might be alive somewhere down this very street. Destiny pointed at a blue house with a sagging fence. "That's where I see them. In the backyard. They run, but only for a little bit. Then they go quiet again." He stared at the house. His pulse hammered. His breath staggered. This place, this broken, tired house, stood in brutal contrast to the high-class life he'd paid for. The contradiction cut deeper than grief ever had. If what he feared was true, then the woman he once loved didn't just betray him. She stole 18 months of fatherhood and buried him under a lie. But he didn't go to the door yet. He stood still, letting the scene burn itself into his memory. The chipped paint, the silent yard, the faint sound of something, maybe a laugh, maybe a cry, behind the fence. Destiny tugged his sleeve. They're inside right now. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't move. He simply said, "Stay behind me, no matter what happens next." Destiny stayed close behind him as he walked toward the sagging fence. Every step felt heavier than the last. He expected silence, but instead, a faint sound drifted to the wooden boards. A tiny giggle. Light. Familiar. A sound he had trained himself to forget. His entire body locked. That laugh didn't just sound like his daughter's. It belonged to them. Destiny whispered, "That's them? I hear that laugh a lot." He moved closer, hands gripping the rough wood. Another voice rose, softer, shy, the way his second twin always spoke when she felt unsure. The two tones braided together. Echoing through the yard like a ghost he didn't believe he'd ever hear again. His vision blurred, not from sadness, from shock too big for his mind to contain. For 18 months he had cried into silence, and now that silence was laughing behind the fence. He forced his breath steady and pushed open the gate just enough to see inside. There, two little blonde girls. Longer hair, older, but the same radiant faces he used to wake up to. They were jumping rope, holding hands between turns, exactly the way they used it in their backyard before school. His throat closed. His eyes stung without warning. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't hope playing tricks. This was real. The rope slapped the ground. One twin turned. Her eyes locked on him, blue, bright, confused. She froze. Her sister froze with her. The rope fell. For a moment, time didn't move. 3 lives hung in a breath. Then he whispered, voice cracking as if it had rusted over the months. "Emma? Sophie." The girls didn't run to him. They stepped back, fear clouding their faces. Fear he wasn't prepared for. To them, their father had disappeared a year and a half ago. Their mother had told them he didn't care anymore, that he left, that he forgot. He hadn't forgotten a single day. The back door slammed open. A woman stepped out, hair disheveled, robe on, shock flashing across her expression. Victoria. She froze the moment she saw him. Her face drained so fast, almost looked like a mask sliding off. What are you doing here?" she stammered. He didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the twins, whispering again, "It's me? Daddy's here." Emma's lip trembled. Sophie clutched her sister's arm. Recognition flickered. Slow, painful, real. Emma was the first to move. She took one step, then another. Sophie followed, tears spilling. They were inches away, close enough to touch, close enough to feel the truth crash against the lies they'd been fed. Victoria lunged forward. Girls, inside, now! He rose to his full height, rage sharpening every word. "No, they're not going anywhere." Victoria swallowed hard, eyes darting as if searching for an exit. "I can explain," he cut her off. "No explanations. Not today. Not after this." Her hands shook. Her face twitched. And for the first time, he saw guilt, not just guilt, fear. Fear of being caught. Fear of losing control. Fear of what he might know. Destiny's small voice rose behind him. "I told you, sir. I told you they were alive." Victoria spun toward the girl. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Destiny behind him, gripping his sleeve. He stepped in front of her. "You don't get to question anyone today." The twins tugged at his shirt, tiny hands shaking. "Daddy, where have you been?" Emma whispered. His heart shattered all over again. He kneeled, gathering both girls into his arms, swallowing back every scream, every broken night, every memory a cry beside tombstones that weren't graves at all. "I never left you," he breathed. "I never stopped looking." Behind him, Victoria's face collapsed into a mixture of panic and calculation. She knew this moment was the beginning of the end, because the truth was no longer buried. It was standing right in front of her, holding her daughters in his arms. And now he wanted answers. Victoria stepped back toward the doorway like a cornered animal, eyes flicking between the twins and the man she never expected to see again. Her voice cracked as she tried to pull herself together. "You don't understand the situation," he didn't shout. He didn't move toward her. His calmness hit harder than anger ever could. "I understand more than you think," he said quietly. "And I've understood for a long time. Because this moment, this confrontation, wasn't spontaneous. It was a final piece of suspicion he had carried for months. 2 weeks after the accident, he had hired a private investigator. The first sign something was wrong, the police report. Sloppy, rushed, half the timestamps mismatched. And the officer who handled the case, Officer Harrison, was already under internal review for misconduct, though Victoria had insisted he was the most helpful one. Then came the financial irregularities. Alimony money draining into accounts he didn't recognize. Transfers routed through offshore banking. A sudden drop in Victoria's spending. Then a spike far above normal. It didn't add up. None of it added up. He had stayed silent, pretending to accept the tragedy, pretending to crumble under grief, pretending that Victoria had won. But behind the scenes, he had assembled something far stronger than suspicion. Evidence. Layered, documented, time-stamped evidence. And the man walking toward the Blue House now wasn't just a grieving father. He was a man who had been preparing for war. Destiny tugged his sleeve gently. "Sir, I can show you something else." Victoria's eyes widened. What does she mean? What is she talking about? He ignored her and nodded for Destiny to continue. The little girl pointed to the side of the house. "There's a window," she whispered. "I see them through it. They don't look happy. They look trapped." Victoria snapped. "That is a lie." He turned to her slowly. "No, that's fear." For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. Her voice shrank. "You can't just come in here accusing me." "Who said I was accusing?" he replied. "I already know." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. That silence told him everything he needed. The investigator, a sharp-minded black man named Darius, had warned him exactly of this moment. "She's going to deny everything until the walls close in," he had said. "And trust me, we're very close to the walls closing." Darius had discovered forged death documents, altered medical files, a falsified coroner's report, bribe money sent to Officer Harrison, backdated messages Victoria had scripted herself, a luxury apartment under a friend's name, 15,000 alimony payments converted into international transfers, and GPS data proving she was nowhere near the accident site, all of it tucked neatly into a folder sitting in the Grieving Millionaire's car, all of it ready for the FBI. Victoria saw something shift in his posture, a quiet confidence she hadn't seen since before the divorce. "You think this changes anything?" she hissed. "They're still my daughters." He looked at her with a coldness that made her flinch. Then why did they grow up believing their father abandoned them? Victoria blinked rapidly, breath uneven. The twins clung tighter to him, and that single detail cut deeper than any words. They were gravitating to the truth, even before they fully understood it. He rose slowly, eyes locked on Victoria. "I'm done with questions. Now I want answers." But she didn't give any. Instead, she stepped backward, panic taking shape under her skin. The facade she had maintained for 18 months, the lies, the manipulation, the stolen parenthood, all began to crack under the weight of truth she could no longer control. And standing in that backyard, holding the daughters he was told were dead, he made a silent promise. She wouldn't get away with a single second of what she had done. Not anymore. Victoria backed into the doorway, like someone feeling the edges of a cliff behind her. For the first time since the accident, she was in control. Her voice thinned into a whisper. You don't know what you're talking about." He stepped forward, not with anger, but with certainty. A certainty built over months of quiet investigation, sleepless nights, and a truth too sharp to ignore. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," he said. "And so, do you." Her eyes darted toward the twins, then away. Her jaw clenched. Her breathing stuttered. She was unraveling. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "Do you remember Officer Harrison?" Victoria froze. Just that name, Harrison, made her swallow hard, because she knew what came next, and she knew she couldn't stop it. He pressed play. A muffled recording filled the small, broken backyard. Harrison's voice, low, corrupted, unmistakable. "Yeah, Mrs. Thompson, the false documents are perfect. Once you sign, those girls are officially dead. Nobody will question it." Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. Emma and Sophie looked up at her, confusion mixing with fear. The recording continued. Her own voice came next. Cold, calculated. As long as the paperwork looks real, he'll be too broken to dig deeper. Destiny flinched behind him. Even she didn't expect the audio to sound that heartless. Victoria shook her head violently. That was taken out of context. No, he said sharply. This is the context. He pulled a thin leather folder from inside his jacket. Tabs, timestamps, receipts, bank transfers, GPS logs. Every shred of her strategy laid bare like a map of betrayal. He opened the folder slowly, showing her one page at a time. $15,000 in alimony, he said. Transferred to an offshore account under your friend Megan's name. Flip, 3 days later, you're at a luxury spa in Miami. Flip, then a trip to Cancun, right after filing a fake report about needing money for the girl's medical expenses. Flip, and here, bribery payments to Harrison. Each one matching the dates he updated your fake police entries. Victoria's lips trembled. That doesn't prove... Yes, he cut in. It does. Behind him, Destiny stepped forward carefully. I saw the twins lots of times, she whispered. They never looked happy. Victoria spun toward the child. Stay out of this. He stepped between them instantly. No, you stay out of her way. The power shift was complete. Victoria felt it. He felt it. Even the twins sensed it. He turned the next page. A printed screenshot of Victoria's social media. Trips, restaurants, jewelry, all paid for with alimony money she collected pretending the girls were gone. Every one of your luxury posts, he said softly, lined up with the days I cried in front of 2 empty tombstones. Her knees weakened. She grabbed the doorframe just to stay upright. He kept going, voice low, steady, razor sharp. You told the world you were grieving with me, but you weren't grieving. You were spending. Victoria's face changed, no longer panicked, but cornered. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told the truth. What if I lost custody? What if you took them from me? You already took them from me, he replied, and you took me from them. Silence swallowed the yard. Every piece of the truth lay open, raw, undeniable. The lies she had built her world on were crumbling in front of her, and now he revealed the final blow. I sent all of this, he said, lifting the folder, to the FBI this morning. Victoria gasped. Her voice cracked into a scream. No, you can't. You can't do that. I already did. Her hands shook violently. You don't know what's coming, she whispered. I do, he said. Justice. The word hung in the air between them. Heavy, final, unstoppable. And deep inside her widening eyes, the truth finally struck. She wasn't facing a broken man anymore. She was facing the man she betrayed, armed, prepared, and no longer grieving. This was the beginning of her end, and she knew it. Victoria stumbled backward into the kitchen, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. Her breath came out in short, sharp bursts, the sound of a woman realizing she had run out of places to hide. He followed slowly, not menacing, just certain of her guilt, certain of the path ahead, certain that she would finally face everything she had done. I won't let you destroy my life, she cried. He shook his head. You already destroyed mine. Outside, the quiet rumble of a car engine stopped at the curb. Heavy footsteps approached the front door. Victoria heard it, and panic ripped through her face. No, they can't be here already. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sound of a firm knock echoed through the small house. Victoria Thompson, a voice called from outside, opened the door. Her knees nearly buckled. This isn't happening, but it was happening, exactly as he and his lawyer planned. The door pushed open. 2 FBI agents stepped inside, badges raised, expressions firm and unforgiving. Behind them entered Darius, the investigator who had pieced together every lie she ever told. Victoria backed up until her spine hit the kitchen counter. You don't understand, he's twisting everything. Agent Rogers cut her off calmly. Ma'am, we have documented evidence of fraud, bribery, parental kidnapping, falsification of death records, and financial manipulation across state lines. Her hands lifted slightly, trembling. "But they're my daughters, and you hid them," the agent said flatly. "You staged their deaths. You lied to the courts. You stole money through fraud. You paid a police officer to cover your tracks. And you emotionally manipulated 2 minors." The truth landed harder than any punch. He stepped forward, his voice quiet but sharper than anything the agent said. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt them." Emma and Sophie peered from the hallway, holding each other, their eyes full of fear and a truth they didn't fully understand yet. Victoria reached toward them. "Girls, Mommy loves you." They stepped behind him instantly, hiding behind a man they were taught to fear, but who they now instinctively trusted. And that small movement broke the last thread of control she had. "Ma'am," Agent Rogers said, "turn around and place your hands behind your back." "No, please." But the cuffs clicked around her wrists anyway. Her face twisted into something between rage and collapse. "You're doing this to me, after everything I did." He looked her dead in the eyes. "You didn't lose everything because of me. You lost everything because of the choices you made." The agents guided her toward the door. Victoria screamed, but the world outside didn't respond. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Destiny stood silently on the sidewalk, clutching the backpack she used as a pillow at night. Victoria's voice cracked as she was pulled to the car. "You will regret this. You hear me? You'll regret." The car door shut. Her voice died instantly behind the glass. The engine revved, and the car rolled away, carrying 18 months of lies with it. Silence wrapped the street. He stood still for a moment, breathing in the cold air that felt different now. Lighter, real, free. Destiny stepped forward slowly. "Sir, are they safe now?" He looked down at her, this little girl who had changed everything with one whisper of truth. "Yes," he said, "because of you." Emma and Sophie came to his side, each taking one of his hands. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. The way they clung to him said everything. Their father was back. Their nightmare was ending. Their life was finally beginning again. He knelt and wrapped his arms around the girls, holding them as if trying to make up for every second he lost. Behind him, Darius rested a hand on his shoulder. "It's over," he said quietly. "No," he replied, pulling the twins closer. "It's finally starting. And this time, no one could take them from him ever again." The house felt different once Victoria was gone. Not safer, not calmer, just honest. For the first time in 18 months, the truth finally filled a space where lies once lived. He brought Emma and Sophie home that evening. Not the mansion-sized home with empty hallways and silent rooms, but the home inside his arms, in the steady beat of his heart, in the way he whispered, "You're safe now. I promise." The first night was restless. The girls woke up twice, afraid he'd disappear if they blinked. Once, Sophie whispered into the dark, "Daddy, you won't leave again, right?" He held her tiny hand. "I never left. I was just kept away. But no one will ever do that again." Therapists came later. Tears came before that. But healing came slowly, in the moments between the questions, in the quiet truths they rebuilt together. Emma started drawing again, something she'd stopped doing after the accident. Her first drawing was of 3 figures holding hands. No mother in the picture, just the 3 of them standing under a bright sky. Sophie began humming the old bedtime song he used to sing. Soft, shaky at first, then stronger, braver. Every small moment felt like a victory over everything Victoria tried to destroy. Destiny became a part of their lives too. Not as a witness, not as a reminder, but as a child who deserved better. He made sure she had food, clothes, and finally a school to attend. When he told her she wouldn't have to sleep on sidewalks anymore, she cried without making a sound. "You saved my daughters," he told her one afternoon. "You deserve a life where someone saves you too." Months passed. The girls grew stronger. He grew lighter. And the shadows of the fake graves he used to visit slowly faded from his memory. One day, while watching the twins play in the backyard of their real home, Emma looked up at him and asked, "Daddy, are we okay now?" He swallowed the weight of every lost moment and answered softly, "We're more than okay. We're together." The sun set behind them, warm, quiet, honest. A new beginning stretching out in front of all three of them. A life built on truth, not lies. A future stolen, then reclaimed. And as he watched them run to the grass, laughing like they once did, he finally understood something he couldn't feel in the cemetery. Hope doesn't return in a moment. It returns in pieces. A whisper from a brave child, a truth that refuses to stay buried, and the strength to choose what's right. Even when the world tries to break you, he closed his eyes and breathed. For the first time in a long time, everything felt whole. Everything felt right. Everything felt real. If you believe stories like this should never be buried, share this video. And to everyone watching from the US, UK, and Canada, your voice matters. Make it heard.